This event commemorates the spiritual life and work of a Nebraska native who grew up in Iowa, eventually to become one of Papua New Guinea's modern pioneers, Archbishop Leo Clement Andrew Arkfeld, S.V.D. As a key leader in 20th century New Guinea, Arkfeld helped to rebuild the island after World War II and usher it into the modern era. Over the course of his 55 years as missionary in New Guinea, the Catholic Church in the Diocese of Wewak built numerous churches, medical clinics, schools, including the Kandai Teachers College. He was known as the Flying Bishop, and he was a beloved and respected figure both in Papua New Guinea and here at home. His legacy continues today through his family and his brothers in the Society of the Divine Word. Here today we have two priests from the Society of the Divine Word who will share with us stories of their mission, work, and Arkfeld's extraordinary life. Speaking first to talk about Arkfeld's early life is Father Vince Olinger. He will be joined with Father Adam McDonald, who will speak about the Society of Divine Word and their mission across the world. So please let us welcome both Father Vince and Father McDonald.
I will start out by giving, as I said at the beginning, some of the early days of Archbishop Leo Arkfeld. But before I start giving my lecture, I have one question for the audience. For all of those who are related to Archbishop Leo Arkfeld, please stand up or put up your hand. That'll be easier. Just put up your hand. How many relatives? I said at the beginning that we had 90%, and I think I was correct. And that means that I do not have to say very much because most of you know all of these things already. So he was born in 1912 in Butte, Nebraska, and he was the first of 10 children, and this is my theme for this talk this evening, is that he was an ordinary farm boy, but with his faith and trust in God responded in the best way possible to events in his life. And most of these events that are during his life, he had no control over them whatsoever. And I think that is true of many of us. But he was able to see the hand of God at work in these events and responded to these events. But first, some of the dates of his life. He was born in 1912, February the 4th, so this is his 100th year, his birthday of 100 years last year. Also, this coming Saturday, March 24th, 1976, is the anniversary of his installation as Archbishop of Madain. That is the same day that Barbara Olinger, my sister-in-law, was buried in Defiance. And shortly after my dad got out of the hospital, and I was in the hospital in Goroka with hepatitis. So that was the family going on March of 1976. He took first vows or went to the seminary in 1932 at the age of 20. He took first vows in 1938, final vows in 1942, so he was an S.V.D. for 67 years of his life. He was ordained in 1943. He was 56 years a priest. He went to Papua New Guinea, but did not get there until 1945 as a missionary in 1944, and so he was there for 55 years. He became a pilot in 1948, so he was a pilot for 41 years and a few months. He became bishop November the 30th, 1948, 5 years after he was ordained, and he was appointed archbishop then in 1976. He was bishop of Wewak for 28 years, and he was archbishop in Madain for 11 years and then he retired on December the 31st in 1987. So as I said, my theme is that he responded in the best way possible with faith and trust in his God, and of these events he had very little control. Some stories. The first story is the story of him shooting his 2 toes off. Now, I thought all of our relatives knew this, but last night I was with somebody in Westphalia, Iowa, one of the Colas boys, and he had never heard this story before, and I was rather surprised. But anyway, and this is in his own words. One quiet Sunday afternoon, Mom, Dad, my 3 brothers, 5 sisters drove to Woodbine, about 14 kilometers away, to buy apples. I was left alone at home with nothing to do, so I decided to go hunting. I took a 12-gauge, our old double-barreled 12-gauge shotgun, and wandered off to our cow pasture. A chicken hawk soon appeared overhead, but it was too high for my shotgun. I set the 2 hammers on the gun and followed the hawk for a long time. The hawk was a wise one and always remained high enough to be safe. I walked through a cornfield, climbed over a few fences, and forgot that the 2 barrels of the shotgun were ready to fire. I rested the gun on my toes of my right foot and slowly walked back home. My fingers were forgetful, and I pulled one trigger of the gun, and I shot 2 toes off my right foot. I really woke up then and fired the other barrel off into the air. Fortunately, I was able to hobble back to the house and telephone for help. In those days, we had these crank-up telephones with the operator sitting in town, and you talk to the operator. He got a hold of the operator and told the operator what had happened and said to the operator, would you find somebody who has a vehicle who could come out here and take me to take me to a doctor in Portsmouth? And she found somebody, sent them out there, and then of course when the family got home, all they could see was these blood marks from where he had walked through the house, especially when he was standing there at the telephone trying to get somebody to come and help him. But anyway, the doctor eventually sewed him up, and somebody brought him back home again, and there he found his parents and the rest of his family. Now, his reaction to this event, an event which he had no control over, was that he would begin to reflect upon his own life and where his life was headed. He was 20 years old, or almost 20 years old. He would have been 19 in about 10 months, 11 months, because February, this was in November sometime. But first, a few photos of him. I think you've seen most of these photos already if you were over in the other room there with the where the exhibit is. This is Leo, this is Sally, Rita, Vince, and my mother, Florence. I may be wrong with Rita. I'm not too sure. That may be the one that died as a teenager. But I'm not too sure. Lucille. Yeah, I'm not too sure. But the other ones, I'm pretty sure who they are. Leo with his steer for 4-H, which he took to the county fair, and then to the state fair. He did not win any ribbons. He says he learned how to drive when he was 10 years old. He doesn't look 10 years old there to me. After high school, he stayed on the farm. He had no intention of going anyplace else until he shot his toes off. And he learned all of these trades from his dad as a blacksmith, plumbing, farming, running a thresh machine, digging wells, moving houses. I don't know what else he learned, but he learned some of these trades at that time. This is a present-day view of the farm near Panama, Iowa, where Leo grew up. He was born in Butte, Nebraska in 1912, but then 2 years later his parents gave up and moved back to Iowa, where George and Mary had been originally, and bought some land outside of Panama, and this is the farm where they raised their children and raised their family. And as I said, then to go back to his reaction to getting his toes shot off, was he then had time, as he said, this is his words, to reflect on his life the meaning of life, where his life was headed, and then at that time, he decided that he wanted to become a priest, and he writes a letter to the Franciscans, and he writes a letter to the Society of the Divine Word at Techni. The letter to the Franciscans I have not seen, and I have not seen the response that he got from them, but his words were that they sent a list of the studies that they would do, this course, and then you go here for that, then you do this, and then you do that, and so on. Eventually you'll get ordained. The S.V.Ds, they sent a brochure which had a swimming pool in it, had the guys out playing baseball and different sports and things like this, and showed all those sorts of activities, and you can understand which one won out. Okay, I was talking about Bishop Leo after shooting his toes off, what he did, what his reaction to that was. He takes that time of recuperation to reflect upon his life, where he was headed and what he wanted to do, and he writes letters to the Franciscans and to the Society of the Divine Word. This is a copy of the letter, and I will read it to you. Dear Fathers, dated December the 11th, 1931. I wish you would please send me information concerning your school and your order. I have made up my mind that I should become a missionary. I finished our Catholic high school course here in 1930. I am 19 years old and will be 20 in February. I wish you would please advise me if I could enter school in the second semester and perhaps take some courses that I did not take here in high school, so I could enter college next year. Please advise me. A Merry Christmas, Leo Arkfeld. He must have gotten an answer very shortly after that, because shortly after that, then he filled out this admission form to apply to go to St. Mary's Mission House in Tegna, Illinois, and he was accepted and then began school shortly after his birthday in 1932 at the age of 20. He was put back into high school where he had to repeat grades 10, 11, and 12. Then he spent 2 years at college in Girard, Pennsylvania. He did his novitiate in preparation for first vows at East Troy, Wisconsin. I know that some of his family went to visit there because his youngest brother George keeps telling me stories about the time that they were on Lake Beulah, where I live now in East Troy, Wisconsin. He took first vows on September the 8th in 1938, final vows September the 8th, 1942, and was ordained on August the 15th in Tegna. And this is the invitation that he sent out at that time. I'll read it. The Reverend Leo Arkfeld of the Society of the Divine Word cordially invites you to attend his ordination to the sacred priesthood by His Excellency William O'Brien, D.D., Sunday, August the 15th, 1943 at 8 o'clock in the morning, St. Mary's Seminary, Tegna, Illinois, and to offer with him his first solemn high mass, Wednesday, August the 25th at 10 o'clock, St. Mary's Church in Panama, Iowa. This is a photo from shortly after he was ordained. I think it was when they had their first mass the day after he was ordained. And this is a photo on the steps of St. Mary's Church in Panama, Iowa. I think that is Teresa on the left at the bottom. She's sitting here in the front row. The one in the middle is Lola Arkfeld, and the one on the other side is Connie Arkfeld, or Colleen, Vince Arkfeld's children. There, I have named them there. The day after he had his first Mass, he then was to perform the wedding for Clem Arkfeld and his wife Mick, who is sitting also in the front row here with us this evening. This is with his parents, taken many years after his first Mass, of course. But this shows his family, his parents, Mary and George Arkfeld. And this shows the entire group when Mary was quite old at that time. Okay, then he has to become a missionary because he died as a missionary in Papua New Guinea. While he was going to the seminary, the Second World War was going on. The Japanese had invaded Papua New Guinea, what is now Papua New Guinea here that you have on this map. They had their headquarters for the Pacific at Rabaul, which is on the island of New Britain. The man who was in charge of that at that time was the man who led the attack on Pearl Harbor. He was eventually killed on a plane trip to Bougainville. The Japanese had invaded the entire island of New Guinea along the whole north coast, and they were within sight of Port Moresby, which is way down in the south here. And they were going to take control of that and invade Australia. MacArthur was in Australia at the time, and he then, with his troops, then began to island hop around that area and eventually back to the Philippines. And he wanted missionaries to go into what is now Papua New Guinea. And he then went to Tegna and got people to volunteer, or the society got people to volunteer to send people to Papua New Guinea so that they would be there as soon as the fighting was ended. Leo Arkfeld volunteered then to do this in 1944. He had been ordained in his third year of theology, so he was still going to school. 19 others had volunteered at the same time. The oldest one was the man in the middle, and he was the one put in charge of the group. This was Stephen Appelhans, who eventually becomes the bishop in Madain, and Leo Arkfeld you see in the back. A lot of these did get to New Guinea, but I want you to notice very closely this list of names here. Who were the first two in the alphabet? And who were the two that became bishop? Okay? The third one became novice master in Australia and never got to Papua New Guinea. The third one, John Cohill, eventually became bishop in Goroka. So they went by the alphabet, I guess. I don't know. But the war was not finished in Papua New Guinea at that time. They still were fighting after the Japanese had surrendered. The troops there fought on until September 1945 and surrendered at a place outside of Wewak called Wam. And so in the meantime, they had been sent by this troop ship to Papua New Guinea. They actually landed along the north coast here, along here, but then were taken to Australia, all 20 of these guys. And there they lived, and they divvied them out to parishes here, there, wherever. And this Leo Arkfeld winds up at the cathedral in Brisbane with Archbishop Duick. Duick was a kingmaker, or I don't have another word for it. He outlived 3 coadjutor bishops. Coadjutor has the right of succession, and so if he dies, then they get to take his place, but he outlived 3 of them. But he and Leo Arkfeld became friends. And when they got eventually to Papua New Guinea, Appelhans was supposed to be the man in charge, but I'm not too sure why Leo Arkfeld became the man in charge at Alexishaven. So he was the rector there in Alexishaven from 45 and up till 47. But then the man who had been in charge of the mission before the war started, William von Baar, returned. They allowed the Germans and the Europeans back. These were all Americans that you saw there. They allowed them back into the country, the Australians did. And William von Baar was now in charge. What am I going to do with this little Arkfeld who has been in charge all the time? I will send him as far away as possible. So I send him all the way down here to Ley. I send him all the way down here to Ley to a big city where the Australian Army had a large base, and Alexishaven is around here, Wewak is way over here, so we send him down here out of the way. The only way he can get there is go by boat for about 10 days back and forth if he was going to do that, or by plane and so on. So we send him to Ley. While he is in Ley, a bishop by the name of Vesters, a missionary of the Sacred Heart, shows up there one day for no apparent reason, but the only thing that Leo ever told me one day was he must have been scouting out this guy called Leo Arkfeld to find out that they could make him a bishop. So he's transferred to Ley, and part of I'll show some maps here. As I said, oh, sorry, pushed the wrong button. Here's where Ley is. There's where Madain is. Wewak is way up here. And Alexishaven is just outside of Madain, about 10 miles or so. And so Leo is sent there. Now, that is where Papua New Guinea is located as an island nation above Australia. The northern border of it is the equator. The other half of the island of New Guinea, you see Indonesia cut off, that is now, or was before Dutch New Guinea, and that is now part of Indonesia. Here's the same map that you have over there. Okay, so he's pastor of Ley on the coast, and he's got this outstation. Sorry. He's got this outstation way up here, and he has to drive to these two outstations from the coast, and he gets the bright idea that, well, instead of driving for 4 hours, I can fly there in 15 minutes. So he decides that the thing to do was to drive there. Here are some slides of roads today. I got these off of Facebook. Now, if these are roads today, you can imagine what they were like in 1948. Okay, but then I want to recall an event that took place when he was a child, and again, these are in his own words. Now something very unusual happened. Dad, Mom, and the 9 children were all at home. Suddenly a strange sound floated in, apparently coming from some distance. We all rushed out into the front yard. Soon a plane with 2 wings. You have a model of this plane here on the table in front of you. Making a lot of noise, floated boisterously overhead. It looked like a complicated kite with a motor. It seemed as though the various parts were just barely hanging together and making all kinds of strange noises as they flapped through the air. My father said it had to be the Wright brothers. I will always remember that clumsy bundle of plane parts which were somehow or other tied together and headed for some unknown destination. The whole thing was a light gray color. One big thought flashed through my mind and heart. That is it. That is where I should be, up there. This was a dream then that he had from when he was a teenager and built this model plane that is still, I don't know if it's still on the farm out there. Is it still out there? It's not there anymore, Karen. Yeah, okay, I don't think the original got the technique, but anyway. Okay. So this was a dream that stayed with him all these years, and here was his chance. There is you can see the plane here. He built that as a teenager. This was still there when he came on leave, when he was bishop. So Wow and Balola were gold mines inland about 50 miles, 4 hours by jeep. And he says, I traveled the 50 miles by jeep. Once I got malaria on the way and had to return to Ley. Balolo and Ley could be easily reached by plane in half an hour, so I got the bright idea of learning to fly and perhaps get a second-hand plane. I asked the mission superior, Monsignor William von Var, for permission, and he gave it. I got another priest to stay at Ley, and I went to Madain. I'm under the impression, though, that he also did some flying in Ley before he went to Madain, before he even asked permission to become a pilot. Because he was living on what was the airstrip for the town of Ley. I was there with him at one time, and I asked him, well, where was this place? And he tried to remember, but things had changed so much that he couldn't really find out where it was, but it was certainly alongside of the airstrip at Ley. And at the time, he was told that he could simply go there. The Australian Army would provide him with whatever he needed and so on, but when he got there, the Australian Army had already left. And so he just moved into some buildings and took whatever he needed. He climbed over a fence into where the electricity was coming to and hooked up his house to electricity and lived there and lived without any doors on this house. And when this bishop came to scout things out, said to him, you have to put doors on this house. But anyway, he went to Madain, where the diocese was operating a flying service for the missionaries. So this was not something new that the church in Papua New Guinea was doing. They were already using planes before the war. One of their pilots was a qualified instructor. A little Tiger Moth plane was very suited for pilot training and was sitting there waiting. I gathered together my courage and approached the qualified instructor. He asked me if I could ride a bicycle. I answered him that I could, so he accepted me at once for the course in the pilot training. There were 28 training flights during a period of 20 days. This apparently is a photo of the instructor with him, this man, but I'm not too sure just who these two other people are with him at that time. And this is, the Tiger Moth is a biplane with two wings, above, below. This one is not apparently that plane. I think this is an Oster. Then I was permitted to go solo. Since I was also parish priest of Lay, 150 miles away, it was now necessary for me to get back there. I took the Tiger Moth to Lay and spent 30 minutes every day doing touch and go. That is, you land and you take off, you land, you take off, go around, you land, take off. When I had a total of 35 hours of flying, a pilot inspector from Australia came along. He was a nice and friendly gentleman. We had a cup of tea and then went for a test flight. All went well. The red tape was quickly cut and I had a pilot's license. I acquired this license in the year 1948 at the age of 36. These were the good old days of 50 years ago. Now this is in July of that year. July 1948. And he then is in Lay, and he eventually did make one trip to Wau and Bololo. He would spend 2 weekends in Lay and then go there, usually by jeep, but then at this one trip, he made one trip there. I put on the slide that I have in the slide projection, presentation across the corridor there, that he did use the rosary around his fingers until one day when the rosary got caught in the controls and then he stopped doing it. Okay, so he's a missionary, he's an S.V.D, he's a priest, he's a missionary, he's a pilot, now to become bishop. Remember the list. Who's first in the alphabet? Stephen Alphonse and Leo Arkfeld. Remember Dewick, the Archbishop of Brisbane. They are friends. Before the war, Joseph Lurks from Wewak, Central New Guinea, and Francis Wolff from Alexishaven, Eastern New Guinea had both been killed by the Japanese. So while he's worried about getting out to Wau and Bololo, the people in Rome are figuring out who is going to be a bishop in Central New Guinea and a bishop in Eastern New Guinea. And one day, while he is in Lay, he's called to the government office for a telephone call from the nuncio in Sydney, Australia, telling him, not asking, the appointment was made July 8th, telling him that you are now appointed as the Vicar Apostolic of Central New Guinea. Now, which then eventually became a diocese, and so he was Bishop of Wewak then from 1948 on for 28 years. A little bit about the boundaries at that time. When they said Central New Guinea, it was not too clear just where Central New Guinea was. There's Madain, that's Eastern New Guinea, but down there's Eastern New Guinea. But that was called Eastern New Guinea. What it amounted to was that this province, Madain province, Morabay province, Eastern Highlands, Shimbu province, Western Highlands, these all belonged to what eventually became the Archdiocese of Madain. Wewak consisted then of the East Sepik, West Sepik, Wabag, and this whole area here, but the boundaries were not too clear. Not too clear just how far over this way it went. Eventually, the Archdiocese of Madain consisted only of this province. This became the Diocese of Ley. This became the Diocese of Goroka. This became the Diocese of Kundiawa. This became the Diocese of Mount Hagen. This became the Diocese. Oh, that was for Madain. For Wewak, the West Sebik was divided between the Diocese of Idape and the Diocese of Vanimo and the Diocese of Wabag and the Diocese of Wabag, that's it. They then became different dioceses, and the Diocese of Wewak then consisted of the East Sepik province with headquarters in Wewak or Wirrawi, which was the diocesan headquarters, just a suburb of Wewak. So another thing which he had no control of again, so what does he do then? As bishop, he had no control of the fact that he was appointed to lay. We wanted to get rid of him, actually. And he had no control of the fact that he was appointed bishop in Wewak. He was not asked, he was simply told, you are now the bishop in Central New Guinea. And he said in different times that his whole intention, his whole aim in life was then to build up the local church and to lay a solid foundation for the future. This is what he did. He got missionaries from the Society of the Divine Word. He also invited in some other orders, but mainly Society of the Divine Word missionaries to come to Wewak, and they were very happy to work with this man because he was very nice and easy man to work with. He got missionary sisters of the Holy Spirit, the ones that Father Adam talked about earlier. He had lots of them who did a lot of work in schools and hospitals and things like that in his diocese. He also got the Mercy Sisters from Australia who ran schools mainly. He had the Maris brothers from Australia, he had the Salesian brothers from Australia, and he also had a whole lot of lay missionaries. Now these were lay people that belonged to various lay missionaries sending groups from all over the place. And at one time there were 75 of them working in his diocese, mainly in schools and hospitals and things like that. He set up Wirrawi Air Service himself as the first pilot manager. As many as 9 flights a day he made to the different places. There were more airstrips in the Diocese of Wewak than there were in the rest of the country. He got other pilots. At one time there were 4 or 5 planes there. The flights were to move personnel, to ferry cargo to the mission stations, and mainly a lot of emergency flights for the sick. To keep contact with these people scattered throughout this whole area, because there were very few roads, he could do that by plane, but also he set up a shortwave radio system for his diocese. He pioneered this, and a lot of the dioceses later on then had the same thing. Madain actually got one later on. Hagen had their own, Goroka had their own, Kundiawa had their own, Wabag had their own, Daru down here had their own, and Idape and Vanimo had their own, but he was the one that started this. Flights, as I said, to bring in the sick into the hospital from the clinics around the diocese into Wewak. He set up a school for catechists, and that was one way that the missionaries worked in Papua New Guinea, was to set up a central station someplace and then have catechists in the villages in the area around there where they could then contact the people, hold Sunday services, instruct them in the faith, maybe run a small classroom for people for literacy or things like this. And he tried at all possible to have a catechist, one in each village now. How many there were, I never did know. He set up hospitals and clinics, especially maternity, for maternity wards. He had a grade school in every mission station. And He set up workshops in the headquarters for the diocese there for plumbing, carpentry, welding, auto repair, small engine repair. He introduced beef and dairy cattle and chickens, especially for eggs. Now, one of his favorite flying things was to go and round up the cattle. He started a seminary to train local men to become priests, and he told me one day that his happiest day was the ordination of the first priest from the Wewak Diocese, and this took place on December the 5th, 1974. This was Father Carabim Dambui, and later on, Carabim was ordained as auxiliary bishop for Port Moresby. Port Moresby is the capital city for the country on February the 10th, 2001, 25 years after he was ordained priest. This is Carabim. Carabim has since died. He is buried next to Bishop Leo in Wewak. He started a group called the Sisters of the Rosary to work as nurses, teachers, pastoral workers. He started a group called Sacred Heart Brothers, working mainly with juveniles. They've set up Boys Town, 2 or 3 of them in various parts of the country. He oversaw the building of Christ the King Cathedral. I looked all over the place to find some photos of it. I did not find any. If you have a chance to watch the slides on the other side there later on, there is a slide which shows all of Wirrawee looking over that from up on top of the mountain, which is right behind the headquarters for the diocese, looking down towards the ocean, and you can see all of the places that were there. He set up Yarapos High School for girls. He set up Kairarua High School for boys. Kairarua is an island off the coast. He set up Kaindi Teachers College, now part of Divine Word University in Madain. Not only radio, but also he set up a press. He got some of the latest equipment, offset presses from Germany, and had them set up there in Wirrawee and produced many catechisms and other kinds of books, and also supported the beginning of One Talk newspaper. This was started in Wewak. It has now moved its headquarters quite a few years ago to Port Moresby, the capital city. I was general manager of this company for 3 years, and one of my mistakes was getting someone to replace me when I thought I was not qualified to continue in that job. That man ran it into the ground. It is still going. They are published, and there are some copies of that newspaper across the corridor. He started a house of prayer for spiritual direction and for retreats. People could come there for spiritual direction or for retreats. And then he becomes Archbishop of Madain. Installed there March 24th, 1976. 36 years ago this coming Saturday. I will end this with some of his own words. In this book, short story of a long life, he says at the end of that, at present we see 35% of the people as Catholics. That's in his diocese. Indeed, a good start has been made towards developing local clergy and religious. Now we must close with a big thank you to God for all the blessings that he has given to the Wewak mission. Special thanks go also to the relatives and friends who were with us along the way. Yours in Christ, October 1992, Bishop Leo Arkfeld. My theme, I repeat that, the first of 11 children of George and Mary Arkfeld, an ordinary farm boy, responded with faith and trust in his God in the best way possible to the events in his life. And as I said before, many of these he had no control over. His final message, my happiness rests on your happiness, my happiness rests on God's happiness. It starts with God's well-being and grows with God's happiness. As much as anyone's life can spread and focus God's love, light, love, and happiness, God passes on his happiness. I am happy to have been involved in that wonderful activity of divine goodness. Bishop Arkfeld.
And I believe now we have a few minutes for questions. Does anyone have any questions for either Father Vince or Father McDonald? Well, tonight we're going to have the full exhibit available. After tonight, we'll go back to one case. We have a glass case where everything's locked up. Everything else will go back in storage. And Father Vince has loaned us a few things, and so those will go back with him. So we do have a glass case that will be full after tonight.
Paul VI, I think it was, and he wore that for some time until he ordained Bishop Kalis to replace him in Wewak in I'm not too sure what year it was, 80 something, and that was just a flat kind of ring, something like this, but much wider, and Bishop Cohill was given that by Bishop Arkfeld, and he wore that ring while he was bishop. And I had talked with him before he died, asking him if I could have that when he died, but Bishop Cohill told me that he lost it. He said he left it on the sink in the restroom someplace on the turnpike. I have a couple more slides I will show if you are interested in them. There are some things here on, yes, that's why I got these here. I figured that would come up, so I was prepared for this. I'm having trouble holding this on here and doing this. These are the pronouns in Pidgin. You have me, you, em. You see them? But you have two for the plural, me pella and you me. Me pella would be us up here, and now you me would be all of us together. So you have an inclusive pronoun, and you have a what do you call it? She's got some. And the same thing then with the second person plural of you pella and you me, and then the third person plural is all. You have in Pidgin English or in Talk Pidgin, or the official name is Neo-Melanesian, a thing called the predicate marker. And it is simply the one letter I, pronounced E. Now there are the greetings below that, morning, abinoon, good night. And then the question, you stop good, or how are you would be, you stop all right, or no got. Me go long town, now you go away. Those are all English words. Every last one of them is an English word. You pella I like go away. By you me go long town, huh? Me work long given talk long all sumatan belong Creighton. You work on one of something. Yeah, that's enough. You work in one of something. You pella, you work in one of something. What are you guys doing? This would be what are you doing? Or what are all of you doing? You making one of something, and you making one of something. This is the Lord's Prayer in Pidgin, and I will read it for you. Papa belong me pella. You can read it along with me because it's all English. Papa belong me pella. You stop long heaven. Oli sanctum name below you. Kingdom below you come. Oli haram talk below you along ground. All same long heaven. Today give them kai belong day long me pella. Forgive them wrong below me pella. All say me pella. Forgive them wrong. Oli make them long me pella. You know bring them me pella long time. Take away something no good long me pella. the Hail Mary, Ave Maria, pull up long gracia, big belly stuff one time you. All honor you more long Almighty. Now all honor pickaninny belong bell below you, Jesus. Sancta Maria, Mama belong God, Beten long mi pala, all man Mary belong sin, now no long time mi pala like die, all me. Amen. If you want some information more about this man, there are some pages on Facebook. I've listed some below. Native Arts, Papua New Guinea, photos only of PNG. Did you ever live in Rabaul? PNG photo history, time before. Those are very interesting. They just started to show up, and they are from the 1880s, 1890s, and the early 1900s. You have copies of these short story of a long life by Leo Arkfeld, and Can You Ride a Bicycle? I have PDF copies of them, and you can send me an email message, and I will send you a copy if you want them. But that's where I got most of this information. So thank you very much for coming tonight.